Support for NPR and the following message come from IXL Learning. IXL Learning uses advanced algorithms to give the right help to each kid no matter the age or personality. Get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when you sign up today at IXL.com/NPR.
Hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. On September 2nd, 2005, on a telethon to raise money for the victims of Hurricane Katrina, Kanye West said, quote, "George Bush doesn't care about Black people."
I happened to be at my mom's house. And she had the telethon on full blast, of course. And I was watching for Kanye.
This is Rodney Carmichael. He's a correspondent for NPR Music.
And, as soon as he starts talking about not liking how the media is portraying Black people in New Orleans.
I hate the way they portray us in the media. If you see a Black family, it says they're looting. See a white family, it says they're looking for food.
You knew he was off script. And I think when he finally said that line,
George Bush doesn't care about Black people,
I was like cheering and screaming and like jumping for joy because finally somebody said something that was not, politically correct to say. I think, Black folks in general was so frustrated at that point in time. All over the country, just watching the coverage. And it was like a release valve, when he said that.
For some folks like Rodney, it was a release valve. For the media and then President George W. Bush, it was a political crisis.
And I didn't appreciate it then, and I don't appreciate it now. It's one thing to say, I don't appreciate the way he's handled his business. It's another thing to say this man's a racist. I resent it. It's not true. And it was one of the most disgusting moments of my presidency.
Could a public figure like Kanye really say that about a sitting president? Was that something celebrities should do?
I remember being kind of surprised at, the vastly different reactions I was hearing to that comment.
This is Leah Donella. She covers race and identity for NPR's Code Switch.
So I grew up in a very white area, and I remember a lot of the white people that I was around, a lot of my friends and people I went to school with were very kind of shocked and offended about that comment. And then within my family and the Black people that I was around, it was almost like the opposite of shock. It was like a painfully obvious thing to say. It's a helpful thing to say, it's a true thing to say, but this is not a shocking thing to say.
To this day, 20 years later, if you step foot in New Orleans, Louisiana, it wouldn't take long before someone mentions Hurricane Katrina. The city is, in many ways, still rebuilding. And to this day, despite the fact that Kanye West has infamously gone on to say some extremely bigoted things, there are many ways that Kanye West's comment back in 2005 about Katrina are still echoing in our politics. Rodney, Leah, and I are going to look at how that moment reshaped what we can and can't say about racism in American politics, and how a lot of that discourse is still frozen in time 20 years later. That moment was so huge that in 2010, 5 years after the hurricane, former President George W. Bush, in a memoir, referred to this moment as the lowest point of his presidency. Wow. Not the Iraq War, not 9/11. The lowest point for him was Kanye implicitly calling him a racist. Bush said, quote, "I faced a lot of criticism as president. I didn't like hearing people claim that I lied about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction or cut taxes to benefit the rich. But the suggestion that I was racist because of the response to Katrina represented an all-time low." What do you think that former President George W. Bush's reflections on that moment say to you about its potency and why it had so much impact back then?
Wow. I mean, I think it's fascinating to hear that and to think that the low point of the presidency was not that nearly 1,400 people died in Katrina, or that 250,000 people were displaced from New Orleans in Katrina. It was the implication that he was racist. Like, I think it kind of, to me, is a reminder of just how absolutely seriously people took accusations of racism. There was this like obsession with politeness and obsession with civil discourse and the way we talk about the office of the presidency and all of that was happening in 2005. I mean, I think that was like during the West Wing, and this idea of like the presidency is this office that is so sacred and so untouchable that, I mean, Kanye West did not call George Bush a racist. He said he doesn't care about Black people, but like even that was considered one of the worst things you could say. So that particular passage you read is kind of stunning for me to hear.
What about you, Rodney? I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Well, I mean, I think it definitely says a lot about how people in power respond to criticism, right? It's not the actions or inactions that they take and the effect that they cause that causes them the most grief or worry, but it's the criticism, often from constituents that, being called out publicly is the thing that they fear most or that they feel most hurt by. And so even as antiquated as a telethon seems, it was a world stage. And, you can have a really huge impact when you are a famous person who stands out on a ledge like that.
I'm glad you brought that up, Rodney, because I think one of the things that supercharged Hurricane Katrina as a bona fide disaster was the media response. There were survivors who were stranded and waiting on government assistance who were framed as looters and murderers.
One of the things that strikes you is, of course, a Walmart is a store that everybody knows. And to walk in it and see it as a free-for-all like that is, you can't help but laugh.
In the days following Hurricane Katrina, police officers in the city of New Orleans say they were told by the department's top brass to shoot looters.
In an interview, the now retired Lieutenant General Russell Honoré, who coordinated the National Guard response to Katrina, said it was way overreported. People confused looting with people going into survival mode. That was something that Kanye remarked upon at the very beginning of, his kind of wind up to, I guess, his sort of viral moment. I didn't need a degree to understand that what was being portrayed in the media was not likely to be lining up with what was happening in real life for many people.
Yeah, I mean, the media response, 2005, this is still before the death of Mike Brown or Trayvon Martin or, this digital era where we see these deaths of Black folks being portrayed in the media and by the police in a way that seems to attempt to justify their killings. And, that's very much the same thing that's happening in the days after this Katrina disaster. Like we said, that's the reason why Kanye's statement really cut through a lot of the BS and the artifice and this really racialized way that the media has typically portrayed Black folks, especially in times of disaster.
Yeah, I think similarly to what you were saying, Rodney, I think some of the language that gets invoked immediately whenever something happens in a place that is largely Black or largely brown, to me it feels like Katrina kind of set a mold in a way for this. I'm thinking to what's happening in Washington, D.C. this week and over the past week has been on my mind a lot. I think the language that President Trump has used to describe this, majority Black city, talking about roving gangs and this lawlessness and kind of like implicit violence of the people in D.C. And it reminds me of the kind of things that were being said about New Orleans after Katrina. And I think if Katrina had affected a city that was demographically different, it would seem much more like cruel and horrifying to talk about people who are disaster victims in that way. But because all of these stereotypes are so close at hand when it comes to Black people, I think there were all these media portrayals that were using that kind of language in a way that didn't even cause a lot of people to pause or to worry about it.
What you just said, Leah, makes me think about the racialized response to Hurricane Katrina, and that climate change definitely will be affecting Black people and poor people disproportionately to the rest of the population. And we've seen that continue to play out.
I mean, there have been reports, right, that people knew in New Orleans that the levees were going to break. They knew that the kind of infrastructure to protect the city was already severely compromised.
Right, and that ended up having a disproportionate impact on Black people.
Right, the people who were kind of in the direct line of what would happen if the levees broke were considered a population that was not like a priority.
Coming up,
I think for a lot of entertainers nowadays, they aspire to be people of power or capitalists. And the ones that aren't, I think, are less convinced that direct criticism of the powerful will amount to anything.
after a quick break.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Hulu, The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox. In 2007, Amanda Knox was halfway around the world, studying abroad in Italy. She had no idea that her dream would turn into a nightmare. Inspired by the actual events of her wrongful conviction and 15-year fight for freedom, watch the Hulu original series The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply. This message comes from Schwab. Everyone has moments when they could have done better. Same goes for where you invest. Level up and invest smarter with Schwab. Get market insights, education, and human help when you need it. This message comes from NPR sponsor Lucasfilm, presenting Andor Season 2. Andor has earned 14 Emmy nominations, including writing, directing, and outstanding drama series. Vanity Fair raves that Andor is profoundly resonant. It's the best television of the year. All episodes of Andor are now streaming on Disney Plus. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Mint Mobile. This year, skip breaking a sweat and breaking the bank. Get this new customer offer and your 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/minute. That's mintmobile.com/minute. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
To bring this full circle, I mean, part of the reason that Kanye's statement struck such a chord is that he was speaking to something that felt true to many people. A lot of people back then felt that the government had neglected to care for Black people in this time of crisis. And I mean, as you touched on, Rodney, in this conversation, there have been so many times in the last 20 years where people have expressed that they have felt neglected by their government. Now being one of those times. I'm curious, Rodney, when celebrities speak out today, when it comes to, for instance, the war in Gaza or illegal deportations by ICE, are you seeing statements at that same level of impact now that, Kanye's statement did back then?
I mean, for one thing, media is so much different now. Everything is so siloed. You could tweet all kind of stuff at the powers that be, and it feels like you're just talking to the air. You might go viral. But it's not the same. And, specifically when we're talking about hip hop, a lot of the politics are a lot more watered down to a degree. I think for a lot of entertainers nowadays, they aspire to be people of power or capitalists. It's in their music, it's in their image in a lot of ways. And the ones that aren't, I think, are less convinced that direct criticism of the powerful will amount to anything. And, I think that people in power have gotten a lot more blatant in how they attempt to co-opt people with powerful voices. I mean, just look at how many hip hop stars nowadays have either performed for the current president, despite whatever criticisms they themselves might have, given to the president. These tactics are nothing new. Like, presidents have always tried to co-opt famous black people in an attempt to gain the favor of their audience.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, when I think back to that moment with Kanye, that is something that bolstered his fame to a certain degree, right? That I think he only became more popular with people who were already fans of his, and other people who maybe were not fans of his yet. They found that moment to have an air of anti-establishment that they found appealing. Now, as you described now, Rodney, like when I think about a lot of rappers of his same generation who have trafficked in the past with revolutionary imagery or with what they felt was speaking truth to power, now kind of performing for power in so many ways. Like, that's something that we definitely see now.
Maybe this is part of what you're saying, Rodney, but to me, it feels like when Kanye was first coming up, I think people loved him and they loved what he was doing. And so they were listening to what he specifically was saying. Whereas I think now it's like you can choose to love people who you already agree with. And if you don't agree with what they're saying, or if they say something that you don't like, it's kind of easy to find like a replacement celebrity that fills that kind of same hole for you, right?
So I think another thing that's different about this era, and it's even, you see it in black music, even when there are artists who might be more politically inclined, it feels like, and I don't know if this is because of, who we have as president now and how outspoken he can be to combat any institution or anyone that he presumes to be a critic. But it feels like we're entering this era of very like subversive black politics, right? Like maybe this is what it was like in earlier eras where black folks couldn't always be super outspoken, you had to be a lot more subversive in terms of the way you communicated things. I mean, I think about Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl performance earlier this year, which the president was in attendance at. It was a really interesting kind of performance because on one level, you could have been there, you could have been at home watching it, and you could have said, okay, hey, this is entertaining or not. It wasn't until the next day that people started interpreting all of these signs and symbols and deeper political meanings and cultural messages. And so I feel like in some ways there's a lot more like subversiveness in terms of how we communicate, how we critique, how we talk about racism, because, God forbid, like, DEI programs getting cut everywhere and all kinds of other stuff. Like, you have to be a little more artful almost, it seems like, in terms of how directly you speak truth about power, if not to it exactly, So I think that has a lot to do with why we don't see those kind of blatant Kanye moments right now.
Well, I tell you what, in so many ways, we are in a completely different moment now in 2025 than we were in 2005. Politically, in terms of media, in terms of Kanye. But through this conversation, it's so clear to see that in so many ways, things haven't changed that much at all. But I'm really glad that I got to have this conversation with the two of you. Rodney, Leah, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Brittany.
That was Leah Donella. She's a senior editor for NPR's Code Switch, and Rodney Carmichael. He's a correspondent for NPR Music. And I'm going to put on my influencer hat for a second and ask you to please subscribe to this show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening. Click follow so you know the latest in culture while it's still hot. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Lennon Sherburne,
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Nina Patak.
Our supervising producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from Jerry. Are you tired of your car insurance rate going up, even with a clean driving record? That's why there's Jerry, your proactive insurance assistant. Jerry compares rates side by side from over 50 top insurers and helps you switch with ease. Jerry even tracks market rates and alerts you when it's best to shop. No spam calls, no hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Switch with confidence. Download the Jerry app or visit jerry.ai/NPR today. Support for NPR and the following message come from IXL Learning. IXL Learning uses advanced algorithms to give the right help to each kid no matter the age or personality. Get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when you sign up today at IXL.com/NPR. This message comes from NPR sponsor HP. Break language barriers by translating languages in real time with the HP AI PC. With the right tools, work doesn't have to feel like work. More at hp.com/AI PC.